I'm Ben, one of the founders of Bastion Cycles, and today I'm going to take you through one of the world's most technologically advanced bicycle manufacturing facilities, which we call the Bastion Foundry. We took over this space about a year ago. We're still not finished. We vastly underestimated how long it would take to finish everything, amount of regulation, budget, etc. But we've decided to take the opportunity to open the doors and take you through. Eventually we will be connecting all 4 of our facilities that we have with a central corridor. We haven't gotten up to that stage yet. And in here we display our products, we do our bicycle fittings, custom fittings for any customers who come to visit us here. We have offices behind these boxes, which we won't go into too much detail today, and I'll take you on to our next factory, which we call T2, which is where we do all of our advanced manufacturing. We operate across 4 factories, which we call, and you'll probably hear me mention, T1, T2, T3 and T4. Extend all the way down to the end there. And the next place we're going to go is into T2, which is our advanced manufacturing, and it's where we do all of our 3D printing and composites. This is our composites engineering room. It's temperature controlled, climate controlled. There's Sean, who's about to bond a fork by the looks of it. So he's just going through the preparation, mixing the glue, getting everything ready to go onto the fixture. So in here, we prepare all of the carbon fibre tubing. We make it in-house. We start with pre-impregnated carbon fibre in either rolls or in tow, which is on the filament winder over there. So the pre-impregnated pieces get cut to, this is just scrap, but it gets cut on this CNC router to the different shapes in the layout that the guys have designed, and those parts are then wrapped onto mandrels before going into a tool. The filament winder is fairly unique to us. We are not the only ones that use it, but we're certainly one of the only ones that do it in-house. This little machine is super old now. We built this a decade ago, but it's still managing to do the job. We have a plan to build some new ones in the future. And that's currently winding a head tube for our archetype. The guys use a proprietary method of moulding the tubes. We make them entirely here in-house, and we're the only ones that I know of that are using a combination of wrapping sheets and filament winding, and then moulding as well. Yeah, so these are our tools that we make in-house. So once the parts are wrapped and wound, they go into these tools before we put them into an oven where the silicon inside expands a lot more than the tool on the outside, and that creates a really high pressure differential, which is what compresses the carbon fibre and squeezes out all the excess resin and then cures the parts. The next room is our additive manufacturing. So this is where our 3D printers live. Come inside. So we've got our 3D printers arranged along this wall. The ladder systems at the back are to go and change over the powder, to put fresh powder in. We do all our 3D printing in-house. We bought our first machine back in 2019 and our second one in 2020, and now we have 4. We use Renishaw AM250 and AM400 machines. They're out of the UK. The way that this type of 3D printing works is it's a laser powder bed fusion system. It starts with a titanium powder, which is a bit like talcum powder, and then the laser welds each layer into the layer below. It takes about 3,000 to 4,000 layers to make a bike set, and it takes 2 to 3 days. So these canisters will fill up with the overflow unused powder, and then the team throughout the build need to take those canisters, decant them into smaller ones, and then recycle them through one of these sieves. And then after recycling the powder, it goes up onto the top of the machine and back into the hopper. So the powder itself is quite explosive when exposed to oxygen. It's very reactive. It's in such a fine particle system that it can easily explode, but also when it comes into contact with oxygen, it can get degraded. So everything that's happening in the machine is under an inert environment, so there's argon in there. The machine's sucked down with a vacuum, they pull all the air out of the machine, and then they refill it with argon. So after the printing process is finished, we do what we call a flip and we change it over. The guys will go through it's about a 3 to 4 hour process to take one build out and then prep for the next build. Once they take that plate out of the printer, it comes into the next stage where it goes into the furnace. So that plate of parts will go into the box here, which is sealed. We then fill that with argon gas again, because as the temperature increases in the furnace, that titanium is going to become reactive. And so that then goes through a very specific heat profile that stress relieves the parts and anneals and improves the mechanical properties of the titanium. Again, this process takes over a day. Let it cool down. The parts are then removed, and we put test sticks on every single plate so that we can measure the tensile strength of the material. And that's very dependent on the quality of the powder, the quality of the print, even the way that the parts are laid out, how close together they are, how quickly the laser's moving from one point to the other. All of that can affect the tensile strength of the parts. So 100% from multiple points on the plate, we're checking the tensile properties of the material for every plate that we print. That plate will get bolted to this saw. It's pretty industrial, but it does the job. It cuts all the parts off through their supports, and then you end up with the remnants on here, which will then go to our machine shop and get machined flat again for the next print. The guys will use pliers, chisels, hammers to remove that support material to get the parts to a point where they can then go into our finishing processes. I think what people maybe don't understand, part of the reason that 3D printing's not ideal for everything is it's not a plug and play system. There's a lot of know-how in how to design the parts, orientate the parts, finish the parts. You know, a lot of the cost is not what just we produce, but what we throw away. We're constantly reviewing, you know, we get defects, we will go back and look at why, we try to improve that. The guys have done an amazing job at reducing the number of defects that we get, but we're still rejecting at least, I would say, 10% of everything that we print. That's what we call a shift line. So what would have happened in this print, you can see where the support material was holding it down to the plate. That's where that rough surface is. We haven't linished that off because we're throwing the part away. But what would have happened is at some point during that print, some of these would have let go from the residual stress that's trying, you know, we're melting it at over 1,000 degrees. It's putting a lot of heat into a certain part. And then that's, as it's cooling, that's trying to lift and contract. And if it lets go, the part below, like let's say it's building it up this way, the part below shifts a little bit compared to where the laser thinks it should be. And so then the next layer is just that little bit over, and it's, you know, it's microns, but you can see it. And if we were to try and remove that with grinding or polishing, we'd thin the metal out too much and it'd be dangerous. So we just throw that away. Well, not throw it away, we recycle it. So this is our frame building factory, T3 as we call it. And in here, the lugs and the tubes that we've made next door will come into here and they'll get prepped to be turned into a frame. So we have a combination of blasting cabinets, a CNC router, polishing machines, saws. In here the tubes will get cut to length for the specific drawing for the customer. The lugs will get ground, polished, finished, which is through a combination of linishing with the larger belts, linishing with smaller belts, and also CNC and some manual machining is done in here as well. Every contact point with either a bearing or an axle or a hub is machined. So the 3D printing is accurate, but not to that level of accuracy. It also leaves a rough finish, so we need to remove that to ensure that we get a good contact area. So everything that sort of contacts an axle, like the inside of a dropout, or contacts a brake caliper, like the top surface of the brake mounts, the bearing seats, any threaded portions, those are all CNC machined. This is by far the dirtiest process we have. We still haven't figured out how to make this operate cleanly. We're working on it, it's a daily challenge. But in here, we have our vibratory finishing machines, which you can kind of have a look in there. It's not running at the moment, but the parts, when this is running, it's very noisy. This will create like a cyclonic effect of this ceramic media, and the parts will tumble around in there, and that's what polishes the parts up to a certain level. And so we have different levels. We have ceramic, we have plastic. The parts work their way up through those processes before the final step is hand polishing. While it might take, I don't know, about a week to get through the printing and heat treatment phase, it takes 3 to 4 weeks of finishing to polish the metal and get it up to the standard that we're chasing. So this is our test fixtures. We run all the ISO tests here. During development, we will test 5 or 6 different frames in different geometries. We simulate what the worst case geometry, because we do custom geometry, we can't test to failure every single customer's bike. So what we do when we develop a new model is we use finite element simulation to work out what the worst combination of geometry is going to be. So for example, when you're loading the saddle, which is simulating the weight of a rider sitting on the saddle, the worst case scenario for that test is quite a small triangle frame with a very long seat post, because you're then creating the most stress at that point and you're creating the most flexion in that seat post. And so we make a very small frame with a very long seat post and we test that. And then for the pedaling test, it's the opposite. It's a large frame where you've got larger distances between the joints, and then that pedaling force is able to create more twist and torsion in the frame. And so we build a large frame for that one and we test that one. We do all of our own fork testing, handlebar testing. This is an archetype fork that's finished. It's just finished 2 times the ISO testing for both braking fatigue and longitudinal fatigue, so we're very proud of that result. And then this station here is where we do final QC checks. So this is where we're checking finish, gaps, straightness of the front and rear wheel, whether the bottom bracket is concentric or not. Right, now we're at the end of the process. This is our final finishing and paint assembly. Final paint, finishing and assembly. So we take the raw frames that come out of the QC test in the frame build facility, come into here, start at this end and work their way forward, gradually getting more and more paint on them before they go around the other side where all the finished frames are lined up waiting for assembly. So we use a automotive grade downdraft booth. It's essentially an automotive booth flipped on its side. So instead of the car coming in from one end, we bring bikes in. We've got it separated so we can work on up to 3 or 4 bikes at a time. One of the things which is pretty cool, we're using water-based paint. So this is Glacier at 100 line. It's the world's most environmentally friendly paint. The clear coats that we use as well, the lowest VOC in the world. It's just our little way of trying to do whatever we can, even though we don't use a lot of paint compared to how much paint goes on a car. Every little thing that we can do to help the environment, and also for the team, it's a little bit less toxic. They're wearing all the PPE anyway, but it's always good to go to every level that we possibly can. But in addition to that, we use a lot of fancy paints. We're using color shifts and pearls and candies. We use a little bit of DNA from here in Australia, but also did spade out of the US. We also use Cerakote on the Archangel project. And so, yeah, the guys are really using multiple different types of product to achieve the different finishes, like the transparent candies where you can see the carbon fiber come from underneath, or the color shifts where, depending on the angle that you're looking at it from, depending on the direction of the light, sunlight versus shade, the colour of the bike changes and shifts. Once it's finished paint, it'll go into assembly. Kun's just finishing up an Archangel here. It's done in a beautiful Highland green Cerakote. That's it, and that's the tour. Thank you for watching, and if you ever come to Melbourne, let us know. We'd be happy to take you through in person.